So we continue to have the best community on YouTube, and a member recently shared this. Trump works on the international recognized model called Piduma. If you don't know what that means, it is pulled it directly out of my rear. Essentially, that feels like Trump's strategy from day to day. I want to give you an update on the trade war and also let you know that if you're watching this channel, you're not alone. You're not crazy. I can see it and you can see it too, what's going on.
Now, I think someone might be visiting one of those prisons. It looks like you got one of these guys, a Tesla terrorist,
That's right.
And he's got some lipstick. What's that?
You know, Jesse, this guy is charged with committing the Tesla offense in New Mexico in February, and then the GOP headquarters in March. These people thought they could get away with it. They can't. This is our 5th major arrest on Tesla. I guess they are listening. They better listen. This guy is looking at 40 years in prison. I have directed my prosecutors not to make any offers. He is going away, if convicted, for 40 years. He is the 5th major arrest we've made, and stay tuned for.
So that's what the focus is with the Trump people today. We're talking about the lipstick Tesla terrorists, they're calling it, and they're pursuing 40 years. So if you attack a Tesla, I guess it's 40 years. I'm pointing this out because the news, depending on which circles you run in, will feel very different, right? I try to tend to focus on the money because I think that is the key, right? When in doubt, follow the money. This is coming in from the Financial Times just a few hours ago. Trump team has not said what it wants in trade talks. And that's coming from the EU. This is a common story that I've seen from multiple sources, multiple countries, basically saying the same thing. The Trump team doesn't know what they're doing when it comes to trade. And I mean, it's like, it's you can see it in the writing, and now I'll read it to you. It says, the US has not told the EU what it wants to lift trade tariffs. The European Commission said after a 2-hour meeting between the two side trade negotiators made little progress, right? So they talked for 2 hours and the EU came out of it going, I don't know what the USA wants. And they were supposed to, that's the USA, they're supposed to have some sort of strategy this week. That's what I had heard last. Because I guess when they were first started doing the meetings, it sounded like the trade reps from the USA side weren't really authorized to do anything. And we're basically just sort of soliciting offers. Like, what can you give us? What can you give us? What can you offer the, King Trump, that kind of stuff. And I guess it hasn't really improved. This also says EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic met Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on Monday to discuss how to remove the so-called reciprocal tariffs. And it's good to say so-called because they're not necessarily reciprocal. The Trump people just make up numbers, basically. Imposed by the U.S. along with steel, aluminum, and car levies, but the U.S. side failed to set out its demands. So how do you negotiate with people who don't even tell you what they want and they're making up numbers? That's what the EU and many countries are faced with when having to deal with the Trump team. And I just want to show you guys their main focus is on convincing their domestic audience that anyone who attacks a Tesla gets 40 years, and their international policy is murky at best. This is a quote. We need to hear more from the Americans. We need to have a clear idea of what their preferred outcomes are in these negotiations. And then it just says, Gill said Stefanik had repeated an offer to mutually drop all industrial goods tariffs, right? So from the EU perspective, which I completely get, is just like, why don't we just have free trade? Are we allies or not? More quotes here. The EU is doing its part. Now it is necessary for the US to define its position, because they don't know what it is. As with every negotiation, this must be a two-way street with both sides bringing something. And then it just says the White House and Commerce Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment. That's their strategy. Same thing with the J.D. Vance. He's just making up stuff here. J.D. Vance sees, quote, good chance of trade deal with Britain. But it's like when I see this, I'm just, isn't Britain our ally? Like, why are we trying to make some sort of deal? Just to have free trade. They're our friends, I hope. And I say hope because you never know with these Trump people.
Would you ever imagine that we're sitting here debating whether we should deport criminal gang member aliens from this country? I mean, the Democrat Party's at a 21% approval rating. They could get to 0 pretty soon if they continue on this path. Look, I'm a legal immigrant to this country. I came here legally with my family. It's disgusting to watch this country reward people who skip the line, let alone criminals, people who are gang members affiliated to terrorist organizations, and we have the radical leftists wanting to bring them more into the United States. It's insane. And look, Americans voted on November 5th for a secure border. And
all right, so that's Marino. If you don't know, I think he's a senator in Ohio. And every day on Fox, they just tell you how, terrible gang violence is in the USA. It's basically what it boils down to, which is, again, very different than, say, the financial news, which is like U.S. trade reps don't have a clue what they're doing, which we literally read it. If you look at Fox News, I just want to show you kind of why we have two different worlds. It feels like in the USA when you look at the politics, right? Some people are like, well, isn't gang violence our most important thing? That's Fox News, what they run. Top story being something on MS-13. Sure, I went down that rabbit hole, read through all the MS-13 stuff on Wikipedia. You can easily find this stuff. I'm fine with enforcing the law on gang violence. I have no problem with that. But the thing is, though, is the Fox people and Musk also, they overplay like how big of an issue this is. There's the trend de Argua. They just keep acting like this is a major thing. And I lived in the USA, and many of you live there now. And this is a question I posed to you, and I mean this all in sincerity. In your state, is there like a huge presence of these gangs in your state? When I lived in USA, I'd watch local news, and I don't remember seeing anything like they're like on the streets everywhere, doing crack activities. And again, I mean this all in sincerity, because if these people aren't indeed as big as the Fox people make them out to be, then what are we doing? And this is be like, say, on April 8th, I see this. What is Tren de Agua's footprint in the U.S.? Experts say smaller than the federal officials say. Yeah, it's probably true. I looked up, I guess there was some sort of case against MS-13. They're charging them with some sort of killing back in 2016, 2017, so like a long time ago. And I know Musk talks about this kind of stuff a lot, like things that happened a while ago. And again, I have no problem enforcing the law. Please, reduce gang violence, but to act like and basically gaslight people that this is our most major problem facing that Americans talk about. And for me, when I lived in the USA, I was actually, in my opinion, in terms of personal safety, I was always really concerned about mass shootings, be it whatever shooter in whatever city in the USA, and it happens frequently, be it school shootings, grocery stores, etc. And I don't remember any of the, those kind of shooters being part of either of these gangs. And again, I think we should enforce the law on all of these types of people. But I also, want to be honest about what this stuff is. That's why I said I went down the rabbit hole. What is Fox News talking about? And I'm also asking you guys as well. Am I missing something? Is this some like major epidemic? Is Fox News right that we should be focused on this stuff? Because again, for me, I like to follow the money, because I think that's what Americans do want to talk about: jobs, money, these kind of things. This was in the headlines today. U.S. 2.36 trillion tourism business fears Trump slump over tariff turmoil. And I'm just being frank with you guys. I mean, we just saw the warning yesterday from EU that was like, if you're going to go to the USA, bring your burner phone, bring your burner laptop. They're worried about getting searched, etc. Customs at the border. It just feels like this is not safe for people to visit, and tourism is going to take a hit. And it's not like you're concerned necessarily about gang violence. You're more concerned about the Trump people. Another headline: tourism pullback boycotts set to cost U.S. a staggering $90 billion. On top of that, the trade war. I mean, Trump's playing hardball and losing badly. It was just announced that China, you can see right here, China orders Boeing jet delivery halt as trade war expands. Basically, China is telling their airline companies to stop orders on Boeing, which is major because, Airbus is probably going to take a huge lead over Boeing. They already have, in my opinion. Boeing's just like literally falling apart. And then you have this where if you can't send any orders to China, who else is you going to sell it to? I think we're and then if tourism's down in USA, I think you guys see where I'm getting at. On top of that, I wanted to bring this up because I read all your comments. I just want to, that's why I said sometimes I go down the rabbit hole and just want to answer questions. people are, who are looking for a shining light, and you want someone to oppose Trump, and you think, oh, it's going to be China. Guys, and I lived in China. I worked in China, right? I write about this stuff in my book. It's not perfect. I want to make sure that that's clear and be honest with you. And I know it complicates and muddies the water when it's like, which bully are we choosing? For those of you who don't know, please look up the Cultural Revolution. You may never heard of this thing before. It's something that just wouldn't be taught in American public schools, which I completely understand, right? It's not necessarily something that you should focus on when there's a lot of things in the world that you can talk about. But basically, 1 to 2 million people were killed during this time. It's a really complicated history. It has to do with the kind of the political change in China and sort of where we are today with the Communist Party. When I was at Tsinghua University, as a top university in the country, many of the political leadership come from Tsinghua. So I've been around this stuff. It is a dark time in Chinese history, and even today, like when I mentioned human rights stuff, there are Chinese people, and you never know if these are bots or real accounts or whatever, that will defend China and not talk about this stuff, right? The same way, say in USA, where there's people who turn a blind eye to what's happening in Gaza. And I just want to really make it clear that I don't condone any violence or supporting this kind of stuff. And I wish we'd have honest conversations about these things, because I think for us regular people, 99.9% of us, we pretty much would all get along if our leaders wouldn't figure out ways to divide us and figure out ways to steal from us. So, for example, in Musk's situation, he's after your Social Security and basically defying court orders. What it looks like to me, not to mention the Cultural Revolution thing, is if the Musk and Trump get their way, they'll just cut off as much people as they possibly can. They want to fire you, send you to the mines, and go after Social Security. Like, you can literally see it. It's ridiculous. And on top of that, I also want to emphasize as well for people in the USA or people in Israel, people are you, etc. Not everyone is on board all the time with their government, right? We always need to separate the government from the people. So, for example, this was something that is a positive news. Thousands of Israeli military reservists call for deal with Hamas, and obviously there's people out there going to be more hardline and say no, we should never negotiate. We should just bomb everyone in Gaza, and that's the only way. But no, not everyone feels that way. There's some people that's like, hey, cease fire, please, right? Okay, and this is what it is. It says a growing chorus of thousands of Israeli soldiers, reservists, and former senior military officers have signed open letters demanding that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu make a deal with Hamas to end the war and secure freedom of the remaining hostages in Gaza. The letter criticizes Netanyahu for his decision last month to abandon a ceasefire with Hamas and return to fighting rather than proceed with a deal that could have resulted in the remaining 59 hostages. Some two are still alive, being freed in exchange for a permanent truce. And so, I just wanted to I think this is an important story to talk about again. Just because a particular government is saying something doesn't mean everyone is going along with it. And then on top of that, the vast majority of us in the world basically just want to live our lives in peace and have a reasonably fair world and safe world, which is not crazy, but. There's people out there who want to divide us, and the Fox News, they're really in that camp. They're fairly frank, and get you focused on things that aren't necessarily the most pressing issues that people are thinking about. And some things, like when Fox brags about whatever stuff, that they'd either take credit for someone else's work or misrepresent what's really happening. So just wanted to share these thoughts with you. Just get these things off my chest. I know sometimes these videos get complicated, but it's a complicated world, and that's what I have to say about it. So I do appreciate your time, everyone, and I'll catch you on the next video.